StarCraft may be an old game, but it never fails to bring surprises. When we think of IM Katowice, names like Dark, Serral, Maru, and Raynor come to mind. Players that we expect to dominate and claim the championship. But this year, an unexpected player came out of nowhere to upset this balance. Oliveira, the Chinese Terran player that no one had on their radar. He stunned everybody by making it to the grand finals. After barely scraping it out of group stages, he defeated highly rated players. And against all odds, Oliveira found himself facing off against the powerhouse, Maru, the best Terran player in the world. With only 6% chance of winning, Oliveira had to contend with Maru's signature proxy racks play if he wanted to lift this trophy. Despite beatdown after beatdown, Oliveira refused to give up, and in the end, he achieved the greatest underdog story that we have witnessed in a long time by defeating Maru and becoming the world champion. This is the grand finals of IM Katowice 2023, and we're going to break down and explain the critical moments of how Oliveira accomplished the impossible. Oliveira was known as Time, who had been making waves in the StarCraft Chinese scene since 2016, but he hadn't really made much of a splash outside of China. Some people thought that he was a decent player, but they didn't think that he would make it past the round of 32. Oliveira was basically an afterthought in other players' stories of success. But at IM Katowice 2023, he surprised everyone with an amazing run that defied all expectations. To really appreciate what he accomplished, we need to follow his path through the tournament to the grand finals, where he'd face off against Maru, the top-ranked player who was heavily favored to win. In the group stages, Oliveira barely made it out with a 2-3 record, losing to Neve, Dark, and Ragnarok. But he turned things around in the round of 12 by beating Hero Marine, one of Europeans' best Terran players. Things got really spicy in the round of 8 when Oliveira faced off against Raynor, one of the top 3 Zerg players in the world and a former world champion. Oliveira won this series 3-2 in a nail-biter of a match. This was a series that had pros talking and analyzing the match results for days afterwards. In the semifinals, Oliveira took on Hero, the best Protoss player in the world and former GSL champion. Despite giving only a 24% chance of winning, Oliveira defied the odds again and defeated Hero 3-1. So here we are, the grand finals, with Oliveira facing off against Maru, the highest ranked player in the world, with a score of 96 on his player card. Maru had only lost one match in the group stages and 2 games total in the entire brackets leading up to the finals. Oliveira, on the other hand, had a predicted 6% chance of beating Maru. The first game of the series takes place on Maru's map pick, Dragon Scales. This map is shorter in rush distance by 35 seconds, which works very well for Maru's aggressive playstyle. Both players begin with similar builds, opening with Reapers and Command Centers on the low ground, while teching up to the factory. Maru is the first to make a move, getting ready for a drop inside of Oliveira's main base. Oliveira demonstrates his game sense by anticipating Maru's attack, by positioning his units accordingly. He has a Widow Mind at the natural and patrolling back and forth for any potential aggression. Maru, however, carries on his plan, and he goes for this elevator strat, a tactic where a player fills up a dropship, unloads into the base, then loads up again and dumps a fresh batch into the base to overwhelm your opponent. We can see that despite being ready, Oliveira is driven back just enough to allow Maru to lay siege to the starport. Oliveira tries to utilize his Raven with auto turrets, but it doesn't work. And Maru's medevac and siege tank makes all the difference in the fight. And Maru now has total control to continue his attack and secures a quick victory in game 1. This is where we're reminded of our favorite meme, just play like Maru, which emphasizes pure speed and aggression to take out your opponents. By picking Dragon Scales, Maru wanted to put pressures on Oliveira right from the start of the series, which puts Oliveira down in the biggest match of his life. On Gresvan, Oliveira is caught unaware with Maru's proxy racks, a signature strategy that Maru is known for when he's up a game. Oliveira locks into building a reactor, hoping to be ready with a unit count for another aggressive attack like the previous game. Unfortunately, this timing leaves him vulnerable to 2 Reapers that Maru sends his way, resulting in the loss of 5 SCVs and halting his command center from being built. Maru is controlling the tempo of this game, and it's looking like an easy 2-0 for him. However, this is where the timeline starts to split, and Oliveira takes a huge gamble. Instead of going for the defensive positioning after pushing Maru out with his Hellion, Oliveira pushes with his forces onto Maru's Reapers. This is a risky move, as the Reapers could easily respond by jumping back into the main base. But Maru decides to retreat, either surprised by Oliveira's aggression or due to just that good timing from Oliveira. Maru sends 1 barracks back to his base and uses the other to scout. This is the standard Terran move after a proxy racks, just to confirm what your opponent has coming up. But he misses the medevac, which turns out to be crucial information as Oliveira is choosing aggression again, and he grabs his whole army to attack Maru's natural. Meanwhile, Maru attempts to use his remaining Reapers from this proxy attack to weaken Oliveira in hopes of gaining an advantage leading to the mid-game. As Oliveira chases Maru's retreating SCVs, a lone SCV stops on the supply depot, keeping it lowered long enough for Oliveira to slip into the main base. Because of Maru's Reapers back at the main base, he has to jump his control back between attacking Maru and defending against Maru. Wow, in the end, Oliveira takes out Maru's tank in the main and cleans up the Reapers, causing Maru to tap out at 6 minutes and 27 seconds. In Game 3 on Neo Humanity, we see a cautious Maru facing off against an in-form Oliveira, who makes a critical play by taking out Maru's Raven with a well-placed lock-on. The Raven is a versatile unit that plays a vital role in early TVT tech, and this loss has an unspoken impact on the rest of the game. Fast forward to the 7-minute mark, and we see Oliveira splitting his army to bust through Maru's third, while Maru begins his attack on Oliveira's third. Drawing back to his natural at the same time, this forces Oliveira to respond, and he charges in with his stimmed up army. Maru's tanks are ready and waiting, but after 2 disables on his tanks, they make them easy prey for Oliveira's main army. If Maru's Raven had survived to drop its own disables or auto turrets, we might have seen a different outcome for this battle. With his tanks uncontested, Oliveira pushes into Maru's natural, leaving Maru mining on only 1 base, compared to Oliveira's 3. In a desperate attempt to deal some damage, Maru goes for a double drop in the main, taking out 6 SCVs and using a Liberator to fend off Oliveira. However, it's not enough to turn the tides, and Oliveira's aggression is too much for Maru, and his forces begin to dwindle, forcing Maru to tap out. Game 4 takes place on Babylon, and it's a mirrored matchup where both players are opting for that classic Terran opener, the 1-1-1, followed by command centers on the low ground. But Oliveira is not taking any chances, and he positions his unit strategically with 3 Reapers and a Hellion right by Maru's exit, waiting to see what he's got planned. Maru, looking shaken after losing 2 games in a row, makes his move out with a medevac, mirroring his comp from Game 1. However, Oliveira's early warning systems are triggered, and he manages to cut off some of Maru's forces. Without the option of an elevator play, Maru boosts his way into the natural, only to be immediately shut down by a lock-on from a Cyclone. Meanwhile, Oliveira takes advantage of Maru's distraction and sneaks 3 Reapers into Maru's base, dealing a blow to his economy. Maru, usually stoic, shows a rare moment of emotion as he acknowledges the oppressive attack. If this were an anime, it would be the moment where the final boss recognizes the strength of his opponent. As Maru scrambles to recover, he takes a risky move and commits to a 3rd base on location, hoping to gain an advantage going to that mid-game. Oliveira doesn't give Maru any time to capitalize, and he makes a textbook StarCraft play by pushing across the map while dropping his own 3rd base behind the push. Both players utilize Ravens and tanks in this fight, but Oliveira's decision to use 2 quick auto turrets instead of interference matrix for extra DPS proves to be the right call. Maru is forced to tap out, and Oliveira takes a commanding 3-1 lead in the series. Maru is on full focus mode as we move on to Ancient Cistern. Oliveira opens with a Reaper into a command center in the low ground, while Maru opens with a Reaper into a factory, leading to a faster 1-1-1 and a quicker aggression. Maru reuses the same build that he's used all series, that double gas into tank drop, which may seem odd for many players, but Maru is the kind of player that can macro out into the late game where he's arguably the best. Maru wants to be the first one out on the map to try to get some damage done. Oliveira knows this about Maru, so he opts for that solid defense. Instead of a tech lab on the starport to get a Raven, Oliveira produces a tank and a Viking to hard counter the tank drop. Oliveira knows his opponent. Maru starts poking Oliveira, testing his defenses and looking for an opening. Not finding a safe angle to push up, Maru changes tactics and opts for a quicker third command center by cutting marine production. Before long, Oliveira takes up a forward position outside of Maru's third base, and realizing that his window of opportunity is closing, pounces. While utilizing auto turrets over lockdown, something Oliveira has favored in every engagement with the Raven and has paid off in the past, but Maru just targets down those auto turrets, and at first glance, it looked like Maru's tanks could reach Oliveira's, but in reality, they're several out of range and 10 SCVs are destroyed. Maru barely manages to juggle his tanks and comes out ahead in the first major engagement. Feeling confident, Maru pushes back with how long he's been mining from his third base. Tunnel visioning to try to get some damage done, Maru ends up overextending. He moves forward, taking out a tank, but loses his marine army in the process. This is another example of where Maru tries to fall back on his aggression. A style that has crushed so many players before him is proving ineffective against Oliveira. Knowing that Maru has overcommitted, Oliveira counterattacks, taking out 16 SCVs by the time Oliveira's marines are pushed away. Though it looks like Maru is struggling, he has his fourth up, he's further along his upgrades, and he has 2 factories to Oliveira's 1. And in TVT, the tanks matter a lot. As we enter into the mid game, both players begin sharking around the center of the map, constantly on the lookout for army positioning. This is a dangerous part of the game as both players are scanning, tracking each other's movements and upgrades. Maru moves to steal the game at Oliveira's 4th, utilizing his higher tank count by taking up 2 positions, but Oliveira double drops marines on top to stop the siege, while at the same time taking out Maru's 5th. This brings the game closer, with Oliveira holding higher tanks and Viking counts. Maru begins trading off his marine army by stimming them up the ramp towards Oliveira's natural, looking for damage. This is an excellent decision for trading off his marine army into higher tech units like Ravens, Vikings, and tanks. Oliveira has transitioned into Liberators with range. Tanks siege up for both players. Maru has the Raven disable, but Oliveira has Vikings to keep it at bay. The air battle will be the determining factor of deciding whether this base stays or not. Maru fires anti-armor missiles into the Viking cloud, but Oliveira has more actual damage in his army, and he's beginning to win the battle for the skies. With control of the skies, the Liberators and the tanks slowly start pushing Maru up against a wall to defend his third. Maru still has 6 bases, so losing this base isn't as scary. The scary part is the lack of tanks for Maru. Maru makes the decision to give up the base and stop chasing Oliveira, and just charges across the map for the natural expansion. He knows that there should be less tanks defending since Oliveira has committed a handful to cleaning up that expansion. Maru secures a decent position, but again is left in a tough spot in the air. His Raven count is high, but the Viking count is below Oliveira's, and no amount of anti-armor missiles will make up for that difference. Without Vikings, it's going to be hard to spot for tanks. Knowing that he cannot keep up this position, it's now Maru's turn to hunt down expansions. He swings his army up to the third base and quickly cleans that up. But instead of pushing forward to clean up additional expansion, Maru repositions back to the right hand side of the map. He's completely unaware of how many bases Oliveira actually has compared to him, and he leaves an undefended and unscouted base. By repositioning to the right hand side of the map, this gives Oliveira the chance to push across the map to pull off the most important move. Keep an eye on that minimap. Oliveira knows exactly where Maru's army is located and knows that there's nothing back at home to defend. With a huge stim and siege up allows Oliveira to camp inside of Maru's main base and hold this position hostage. Maru is forced to respond and brings back his main army. With all the ravens that Maru's kept alive, it's allowing him to lock down all of Oliveira's tank, a position that would have killed a lot of lesser Terrans. But did you see the 35 SCVs killed? While the attack was going on, a lone Liberator snuck its way into Maru's base to attack unhindered, suffocating Maru's economy. Maru positions himself in the bottom right to defend his expansion as Oliveira moves his way forward ready to fight. When you're playing such a non-stop match, sometimes a simple reposition can cost you your army. That's exactly what happens as Oliveira's scan shows that Maru's army unsieged and tried to reposition. Half of his tank moved north, while the rest of his army moves west, the pathing of the units trying to reach the desired location as quick as possible. This is it, the mistake that Oliveira has been waiting for. He leaps into action and Maru reacts by blanketing the army with anti-armor missiles. Maru's supply drops from 150 down to 60. Within seconds, Maru GG's and Oliveira has done something that no one has expected, something he only had 6% chance of accomplishing. He has defeated the best Terran player in the world to claim the trophy and the title of the world champion. There's no denying that Oliveira proved himself at IEM Katowice. However, what we haven't talked about is his incredible attitude. He never gave up on his dreams and worked tirelessly to train harder, which allowed him to have such an unexpected run. But what really stood out was the energy that he brought. Even when he was playing the most important games of his career, he was still full of life and enthusiasm, which was contagious to everybody watching. It's not just about how he won the tournament, but how he won our hearts.